The Milwaukee Brewers had one of the worst collapses in MLB history. Let's put it that way. The reason they did not make the playoffs, they did win the NL Central. Well, this season, let's see if it can change. A lot of questions. What will Christian Yelich do? We're going to talk about it here on a Route Report edition of the OK Baseball Podcast. And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Route Report here at OBP. I'm your host, Christian Rao. This is a Slasher Sports production. Well, we're talking the NL Central today, and we're talking the Milwaukee Brewers. If we were talking about the first 75% of the season last year, you would think that this was the division champs. However, one of the craziest just breakdowns in all of baseball honestly, you can make it a historic kind of breakdown. It was just a collapse. But before I really dig into that deeper, I got my partner in crime, Billy Graves, to join me today. Billy Graves is one for Slasher Sports Cinema, working on the horror side. But if you know from our team previews from the past, a huge Brewers fan covering those Nashville Sounds, their AAA team. Billy, what's going on, my man? Welcome back to the show.
Patted the wrong logo. The mirror swap got me. It got me. Hey man, everything's everything. It's good to be talking baseball again, man. It's been too long since we've gotten onto the same screen and been doing the same thing. We're kind of running different legs of this monster. And I love what you're doing. I love what I'm doing. I think our listeners are having fun with everything that we are doing. Gosh, man, it's such a wild thing to really put it together that sports and horror film, how do you cross the two things? But the truth is, man, we're the same people. The jocks and the nerds. Now that Venn diagram does, it overlaps a whole lot more than we get credit for. I remember playing baseball with a kid named Anthony. He was like kind of I wouldn't call him a gothy kid, but he was a nerd, but he was also a jock. Like had the best fastball that you could ever ask for from a 12-year-old or whatever. But we are the same people, man. Horror films, scary movies, sports, it all goes hand in hand, man. Same pulse, same body. Let's do it.
I couldn't agree more, especially because the team we're talking about had a horror movie of their own in 2022. If you want to call it the sequel or whatever the case may be, offensive production strikes again, however you want to call it. But let's get right into it. And I like to start off these previews with a look back of last year. And it's really hard not to look back last year with an upsetting look of the Milwaukee Brewers. 86-76 is where they finished. But again, as we mentioned already a couple times in the show, a historic collapse from the Brewers last season. From your perspective, someone who really focuses more on the minor leagues of the Brewers, but I know you pay attention to the major league team quite well. What was your takeaway from this team?
Yeah, I don't miss a Brewers game, man. Being in Nashville, or really just north of Nashville, the Sounds are always going to be where my fandom goes. And for now, we don't know what that major league squad is going to look like, if there's going to be one in Nashville or not. And if there is, you know what I have to do.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I've got to tell the Brewers to look at the flowers, just look at the flowers and then blam, put them out of their misery. But man, it would be an understatement if I said the last quarter of the season was like a real kick in the junk. Okay. At the beginning of the season, the first three quarters, you'd probably call the NL Central a two-team division. And, the winner was going to be whoever beat up on the Pirates, Cubs, and Reds the most, right? That's kind of what we agreed on when we did our seasonal preview last season. And that's largely how it happened, Christian. But, something I really had a hard time reconciling was how, after picking up the likes of Hunter Renfroe, Andy McCutchen, Mike Brasso, they were supposed to pick up some slack that had been left in 2021 against left-handed pitching, where we couldn't touch left-handed pitching. We brought in those three killers against lefties anyway. And, but the Brewers outside the home run ball still couldn't score runs outside the division. If you were to look at maybe the overall stats, team stats rather, you'd find the Brewers kind of in the middle of the league when it comes to runs per game. But remove the numbers from the NL Central, where we're not picking on the Reds, Pirates, and Cubs. Like it's damn near the bottom of the league. And guys like Rowdy Tellez knocking 35 home runs, Willie Adames knocking 31, Renfroe 29. So almost 3 guys with 30 home runs. Not bad for us. We're not the Yankees, but hey, that's pretty good for us. But when you're knocking nothing but solo shots, those numbers don't seem quite as sexy. That was the story of the season, though, Christian. Like the Brewers were a team who, if the home run ball was not flying, they just weren't scoring runs. The team depended heavily on the pitching staff to be as dominant as they were the previous season. Maybe allowing for a little regression, because who could you couldn't really expect that every single year. But I mean, nearly as dominant as they were in 2021, where Corbin Burns won the Cy Young Award. Like a prediction that I nailed right there, Christian.
You did. I do remember that. Yes, I did.
Right here on this very show. I like to brag about that a little bit.
As you should.
But the pitching staff didn't dominate as a collective. And like what I have to say to Craig Counsell for that is that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Right. So, and I know the elephant in the room is the Josh Hader trade. It's always going to come up. But what comes to mind when I think about that trade in retrospect, like I can sum it up in 2 words: false equivalencies. Okay. No matter how badly people want it, Josh Hader giving up a bunch of runs in San Diego doesn't mean that he's going to do the same thing in Milwaukee. You didn't dodge a bullet by getting rid of him.
Right.
And you also didn't. Devin Williams is nobody's fool. Okay. He had a little bit of a collapse there at the end. He really struggled after the Hader trade, but it was not because of the Hader trade. Okay. These guys are professionals. Just because his big buddy's out in San Diego, out west, playing ball, doesn't make Devin Williams less of a ball player. That's just how the cookie crumbled. That's the difference between correlation and causation. The 2 things correlated. One did not cause the other. But on the other side of that same coin, the Brewers trading away Hader, it does look ugly for the Devin Williams situation, because he was, unbelievably shaky in the games following. But he's a high leverage pitcher, man. He plays in nothing but high leverage situations. And again, that's just how the cookie crumbled. But I don't think it had anything to do with the presence of Josh Hader, nor the lack thereof.
Yeah.
Did the Hader trade affect morale? Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely
so.
it did.
It's easy to
I'd be sad if my buddy was gone.
Right. It's easy to point the finger at the collapse and say, oh, the Hader trade is what really started that off.
Absolutely. But, does morale mean the professional baseball players go out and pitch terribly because of a trade? I mean, if it does mean that, like, they deserve nothing in the way of a postseason. Trades are a part of the game, and they always have been. They always will be. And I'm sure they probably had some FaceTime calls, some sad texts, but when it was time to play ball, they played ball, and it just didn't work out. Luck had kind of run out on them, Christian. I mean, it wasn't coincidence that people, much like myself, I mean, I wasn't the only one saying this, but a lot of mistakes were made along the way, and we kind of won ball games in spite of it. We won ball games in spite of not putting your hitters in the best positions. Like I screamed all year about Keston Hiura not getting at bats against right-handed pitching. I screamed all year about Rowdy Tellez not, being more utilized against lefties, because I mean he's got the reverse split. Same thing with Jace Peterson. At one point, Jace Peterson was this, last season's Jackie Bradley Jr. He's an automatic out. And I mean, on base Jace was no more last season. He got hot, here and there, but he was no more in 2022. And I do believe a big part of that is Craig Counsell not playing to the strengths on paper. There's a point where you do analytics, and there's a point where you stop the analytics and just play ball. But you can't ignore the fact that Keston Hiura pounds righties, sucks against lefties, even being a righty himself. And for half the season or more, he just ignored that. And when he finally started playing Hiura against right-handed pitching, he started knocking those dingers, and Keston Hiura started looking really good again. But I mean, I'm just a schmuck from Tennessee. He's Craig Counsell.
Hey, lots of things to be upset about in 2022. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned trades, and obviously you bring up the Hader trade, and I think we covered that one nicely, but a lot of other trades happened this offseason as well for the Brewers. You look for offense production, and you trade away one of your guys who is close to 30 home runs, as you mentioned. Hunter Renfroe is now a Los Angeles Angel. You trade Wong away as well. This team looks a lot different. Now, you did get some players back in return, but it just seems like this team is going in a different direction than maybe being the top competition for the NL Central. What's your thoughts and your takeaways about these trades?
Well, I mean, there weren't any huge splashes. I guess you could consider one a huge splash. The rest were just your run-of-the-mill trades. You brought up Hunter Renfroe. Jansen Junk and Elvis Peguero are a pretty good haul for Hunter Renfroe. Hunter Renfroe's a guy who's played on, 3 teams, 3 seasons? Mm-hmm. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Something
going on with him.
Yep.
Yeah, something's going on with him. I don't know what it is. I don't pretend to be in the know with Hunter Renfroe, but I mean, my very favorite player. I know he was your favorite Brewer, and yeah, he was one of my guys. He's my go-to on the Home Run Derby on MLB The Show. Christian, you know this.
There you go. Yeah, it's
true.
You
know this, but we got a good return. And I'm not really even talking about Elvis Peguero. I'm talking about Jansen Junk, man. I'm really excited about him. And then, we pick up Wade Miley, a much needed lefty, who I believe is probably going to lock down the number 5 spot at the very least in the rotation. I think Adrian Hauser probably did enough to see his way into a long relief role, or at least like that 6th man starter, But hey, the splash I was talking about, Bill Contreras, man, fills a much needed position. Okay, after last season, the catcher position lacked a lot of offense. Victor Caratini was a breath of fresh air when he was hot, but yeah, he fills a much needed position, and all it took to get him was Esteury Ruiz.
Yeah, what an interesting way to sneak in there and get him from that Sean Murphy trade. Like Milwaukee just kind of snuck in there and arguably got the best player out of that trade other than Sean Murphy.
Absolutely. And if I may say so, one who may end up being better than Sean Murphy before it's all said and done. Okay, there are Atlanta folks saying that William Contreras could be the best catcher in the game before it's said and done.
Interesting.
I mean, the book's not written on him. He's not even through the prologue yet. He's young. There's a lot of team control. I think about five seasons now of team control, and he's going to put up some numbers if he can stay healthy, which I have no reason to think he won't stay healthy. But he's the player that I'm most excited about for 2023. So if I say it's any other player, call me a liar, because it's Bill Contreras. Okay. Bill Contreras is the one. But hey, we got Peyton Henry back. I mean, he's not going to be on the MLB roster unless some kind of injury happens, God forbid. But he's one that we ended up trading away to Miami and ended up trading back from Miami. So I'm glad to see him back. Being a very good defensive catcher is something that we don't really have, on the roster, is like a predominantly like Jeff Mathis type defensive catcher. And Peyton Henry can be that. So working with the young pitchers is really important for a player like Peyton Henry, and he's going to get those reps in AAA Nashville. I'm looking forward to seeing him. Even he could bat 100, Christian, 100, and I would be completely happy that he's on the team. That's how good his defense is. But who else we get? I mean, we got Owen Miller. I mean, he might not make the squad, but I like him over at first base. Behind Rowdy Tellez. Josh Van Meter, another like a utility guy. We got Luke Voigt on a minor league deal. Now, I think it's going to turn into maybe a spot on that 26-man rooster. I could be wrong, but I think Voit might shore up that backup, maybe even platoon type first base spot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I already said it. Okay, Bill Contreras is the one, but the guy who I am picking as my sleeper for the Milwaukee Brewers in 2023, Abraham Toro. Okay, a lot of people in Seattle beats are high on him.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people really like his versatility, and he's a Craig Counsell type of player, can play a lot of positions. I've seen him listed at third, second, not so much short, but then again, we've got Luis Arias, but maybe even right field as well. And right field is a position that I think we need to talk about a little bit, because what we have there is nothing sure. We have nothing sure at all there. We brought in Jesse Winker. I don't see him as a right fielder. He'll be a DH and probably play a little bit of left field to spell out Yelich if his spaghetti arm, needs to rest at all.
Mm-hmm.
But then we've got, I think Van Meter could probably play there, but we're probably going to end up seeing an outfield that looks something like Tyrone Taylor, Garrett Mitchell, and Christian Yelich. And Tyrone Taylor right now, he's banged up for about 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even a full month. So we're going to get good looks at what's going on in right field. And I really can't. That's the position of interest for me. Okay, a right field. I want a guy with a freaking cannon. I want a guy that can smash. I want a guy that's big and sexy. We don't have Joey Gallo. We don't have Rangers Joey Gallo. But we got something pretty close. And he's not on the 40-man yet. But as soon, and I'm going to bring his name up in a little bit. But at any rate, man, we've got a lot of good things to look forward to with whom we've picked up. Brian Anderson is one pickup that I was really excited about, because we're getting him on after a down year. Okay, and I keep thinking, like, what if we get the Brian Anderson from 2019, 2020? We might be able to play that small ball that we've been missing, with the headhunters that we had. Brian Anderson could do it if he shows up like 2019. I know he's been not very healthy in the last couple of seasons, but if he's gotten right, Brian Anderson can ball. And shoot, he might even take a look at right field if third base doesn't suit him. I think he'll end up being the starting third baseman, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's interesting. Fangraphs actually, looking at the depth chart, Fangraphs actually has Brian Anderson sitting as the current, if they're going to project it, starting right fielder. And they do have Luis Urias as the starting third base. Real quick, let's just go through it. Who
do they have at second?
Yeah, so let's see. Let's go through the whole thing. Now, in the projected order for the Brewers this year, Christian Yelich playing left, Billy Adames playing short, Rowdy Tellez at first, William Contreras, the catcher. They got Jesse Winker as the DH, Urias as the third base, Garrett Mitchell at center field, Brian Anderson at right field, and Bryce Terang coming in at second base.
Bryce Terang, very interesting that they would have Bryce Terang. I have opinions on Bryce Terang. They're not all great, but they all end up being great because I do love Bryce Terang. His power hasn't really developed the way I hoped it would. I was hoping that he would have a little bit more slugging in him by now, but they did rush him through the minors. Like, he spent cups of coffee everywhere but AAA Nashville. And, he was on the fast pace. And it makes me not surprised at all to have seen Colton Wong go bye-bye. I mean, that was not a marriage that was going to last long.
Right.
Bryce Terang and Garrett Mitchell have both been on that fast track. I'm actually surprised to have seen Garrett Mitchell up, in the minor or in the majors first. But Bryce Terang, to me, is that guy who's going to end up being the starting second baseman. I don't think it will be on opening day, but I could be wrong. I was wrong once back in '87. I tried not to do it again. It's bad for the rep.
It's bad.
But it is very bad. But Bryce Terang, all he really lacks is that power. A lot of easy outs sometimes with him, but he's got speed. He's got the glove. He's got the versatility. They tried him out a little bit in center field in Nashville, and that was almost, to me, counterproductive. But again, I'm not a coach. I can't really say, what they're thinking there. I was hoping they were going to bump him over to second base and maybe get him some reps there. Because to my knowledge, he hasn't played any outside of spring training here. He hasn't played any second base to really speak of. So I'm hoping they don't do this this Keston Hira deal where they just, hey, you know what? It's first base. It's yours. Try to play it. And, it didn't work out so well. I'm hoping the position change doesn't cause him to regress in other areas. There's always the possibility.
Right.
But I mean, that's kind of how we go. And listen, I didn't say enough about Jesse Winker. Okay. I do want to give him some love because he's an NL Central killer and he's going into a contract year, man. The only thing I can think of is he's going to show out. He's going to try his best to show out. And if all he's got to be is a DH, man, that's I say that I get pissed off every time, Christian, somebody says, well, if they can't play defense, put him at first. And then I think, well, if all he's got to concentrate on is hitting, then he can be a DH. Not true, man. There's a whole psychology behind being a DH that I never really considered until I listened to Yonder Alonso, who I freaking love Yonder Alonso. But I listened to him talk about the DH. You basically have to go out and hit and then go back to the dugout and watch everybody else play. And you got a lot of thinking to do there in the dugout. So it takes a certain kind of mental fortitude, which is why I don't highly suggest Christian Yelich as a DH. I just don't. He's already been shown to get the heebie-jeebies when it comes to his knee. So yeah, I think he's got a mental game that he's not really winning. So he can just stay out in the field, and I'll just deal with the noodle arm in left field. But Jesse Winker, I think he's the type of guy who's going to do well in the DH position, as long as he's platooning with maybe Keston Hira, because I still want to fit Voit in that first base. So. I mean, I don't know how you feel about Luke Voit. Listen, I know you've got a shaky. This is not a Yankees podcast. I don't want to hear very much Yankees talk. Okay, I don't want to do it at all. But Christian, what's your opinion on Luke Voit?
I think he had a great year in San Diego last year until he got traded. And then he had a rough go.
Don't even talk about the Yankees.
Well, I mean, it's really in the past because I mean, he had a good run in San Diego last year until he got traded, and then he had a little bit of rough go in Washington, but that team was rough. I think he's a great minor league sign, and if you can find a way to sneak him into the system, and maybe work him a little bit, and then find him even to find a spot him on the 26, yeah, I think that's a good spot. But when you look at the other players on your team, you look at Winker, you look at Tellez already, you have Brasso and Hira. I mean, if he can find your way in your system, if one of those guys don't pan out, really more of like a Brasso Hira kind of guy. Especially Hira, because Hira doesn't have any options left. That might be a guy where you can DFA and then bring up Lucas Voit and not really see any kind of swing. I think it's a no risk signing for the Brewers here. I think it could be really good. That's like something you really need is offensive production. We've been talking about that for quite some time now. I feel like this is like 3 years in a row that we keep talking about the Brewers needing offensive production. That's really what's slowing them down. The pitching's fantastic. This pitching's so good. My God, why can't this pitching get them into the playoffs? Because, well, they're not getting any other help on the other side. Offensive production is what's slowing them down. You have a MVP caliber player who's not even playing at all-star level. There's a lot of question marks, but I do think a guy like Lucas Voit could swing into this lineup. I don't know if he makes a 26, but we'll see what happens, especially right now in spring training. Now, a lot of those players are at the World Baseball Classic. This is a time for players like Voit to really shine. I kind of want to swing over real quick to the rotation before I get your take on a couple prospects, because I know you have some thoughts of some guys, especially down in Nashville, and then your predictions before we wrap this baby up. But obviously Corbin Burns leading this one, Brandon Woodruff, Eric Lauer, not so fastball Freddie anymore. And you mentioned Wade Miley, but there's a lot of things stirring around, Billy, because of what happened with the Hader trade last year. And I'm sure you've seen it. There's a lot of talk saying Burns could be on the trade deadline. I have gone out and said, I don't think Burns finishes with the Brewers this year. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think it's going to depend on where we stand near the deadline. Obviously, if we're if we're right there, ready to, if we're looking good, if my guy Bill Contreras is, being the MVP, if if we're rolling on all cylinders when it comes to offense, if we're putting runs on the board, if we don't necessarily have another pitcher like, an Aaron Ashby
Mhm.
who can step up to be the number two behind Brandon Woodruff, I would think Burns is going to stick around. But man, the Corbin Burns scenario, especially with the arbitration, it feels like it's going to blow over. It shouldn't affect him in the long run. But the tradability makes me wonder. Just thinking, if it is in his head, and if he's not pitching well, like how does that affect the tradability? But in the long run, I don't think he's going to be affected. But Brewers fans should not expect him to be around for the long run.
That's fair.
They
That's
should
fair.
not expect him around for the long run. I'm with you on this, Christian. I don't see Milwaukee's front office forking out what Burns can rake in. So, I mean, let me ask you. Your team basically railroads you,
Mhm.
puts it on you that you weren't pitching in the do or die game against the Atlanta Braves in the playoffs. And then, of course, you lose your arbitration hearing. Like, they're hard feelings, man. And
Yeah,
like, of course, there are
arbitration's
hard
weird.
feelings.
Arbitration's weird, and I feel like you have as a professional, you have to go in and you have to hear basically the entire time them giving you every reason they possibly can why they shouldn't pay you as much as they should pay you. I always go back to the Miami Marlins and Sandy Alcantara and Pablo Lopez. Actually, Pablo Lopez, how they were in the middle of arbitration last year with him because it was moved over to the right a little bit because of the lockout. They were doing his arbitration hearings in June when he won Pitcher of the Month in June. And trying to talk about how he's not living up to expectations. Obviously, they were talking about last year's performance, but it's really weird how you have to have those conversations. When you're talking about your cornerstone pieces, that's why you should find a way to avoid arbitration. This is where you get into these kind of weird situations. But with Corbin Burns, I think you're right. We've seen it in the past. Are they willing to spend the money? Well, they did it with Christian Yelich, but that didn't work out. So now are they gun shy? Do they have the opportunity to, as you mentioned, replace him with a guy like Aaron Ashby once he becomes healthy? That's also a really good viewpoint. But if you do trade Corbin Burns, he is that kind of caliber piece that really just turns your farm system upside down, Billy. Right now, Baseball America put the Brewers in the middle of the pack for organizations' farm systems. I mean, the return you would get for Corbin Burns, I can only imagine that you are at least top 10 once that's over.
And it's important to know that there's not a pitcher in the Milwaukee Brewers farm system in the top 9. Okay, our first 8, our top 8 players are position players.
Right.
And then we get into a couple of pitchers, Ethan Small being one of them. Better call Saul, better call Small. But, if you ask me, Christian, about this, the arbitration and the deal between the front office and Corbin Burns, and I think you are asking me,
I am.
I think both sides can be right. Both sides have a case here. And, Corbin Burns was the Cy Young Award winner that season.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But he had a chance to go out and shut down Atlanta. He had a chance. But his excuse was that he wasn't 100% ready to go. Short rest, not injured, man. He's not injured. He's just not fully rested. Nobody ever said he had to go 6 innings. And I'm not saying that it should be what you do when there's nothing at stake or even moderately important games. But there comes a time, like when your team is facing elimination against the eventual World Series winners, and you've got to pick up your balls, load up your cannons for that 21 gun salute. You know what I'm saying? And Corbin Burns didn't do that. I'm not saying they should hold that grudge, but understand.
Yeah, makes sense.
Understand.
Makes sense. As I mentioned, we could see this farm system absolutely flip. But until then, I know there's plenty of people in the farm that you're paying attention to. I'm sure we will see Jackson Churio in Nashville at some point this season. He is making the fast jump up into the majors. I mean, I got the opportunity to watch him in Carolina with the Mudcats last year in A ball. So he's making a fast jump, and I think rightfully so. Everyone knows about Jackson Chourio. What are a couple other players that you're paying attention to this season, whether they're in Nashville or just a couple in the system that you got to really pay attention to? We're really pushing it this year because MLB TV is giving away the minor league package for free, encouraging people to watch minor league baseball. Who you got?
Very glad I didn't have to make that separate purchase. But Daddy,
Right?
let me tell you right now, Joey Wiemer. You asked me last season, you asked me this season, same answer, Joey Wiemer.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes down to his hitting ability, though. Okay, as he rose up into the minors and AAA especially, strikeout rate kind of went up. Okay, now he's it's kind of concerning that maybe something's holding him back offensively. He's got the pop. Okay. Now his walk rate isn't as good either. So he's not laying off pitches like he was in the lower levels. But I think, man, when everything comes together, when he's finally pieced together and he's the Joey Wiemer that we know he can be, man, he is a monster. And he's gonna be, I keep saying Joey Gallo, and I know a lot of people don't like Joey Gallo, but physically, he is a Joey Gallo-esque player, just a little bit smaller. I think Joey Gallo's in the 250 range. Wiemer's at about 225, but he's going to fill out. He's going to be a hoss. His power is going nowhere. His power will stay right where it is, and he's going to get a little bit better. He's already got that laser cannon that you don't want to run on. You don't want to run on Joey Gallo. You don't want to run on Joey Wiemer. So that's my guy. Joey Wiemer's the one to watch, and I'm going to get to watch him here in Nashville. Now, if they knew what was good for him while Tyrone Taylor was out, they'd have Joey Wiemer there in right field for the rest of the spring. But who knows if that's going to happen? But that's the man that I'm giving the reps to. And then the other one we already talked about him, man, but Bryce Terang, the slugging questions are still there. But I mean, he's a tall, lanky fielder. He's got such a good defense. His glove is impeccable. But I mean, he did project to be like a 60 shortstop, a 60 grade shortstop. And I think at second base, there's not much drop off there. Whether they can get him the reps there, I don't know, but they need to start ASAP. They need to start yesterday, especially if they want to make him the opening day second baseman, which I don't think they should. I think Brian Anderson could be the third base opening day, Luis Urias second base, and of course Bill Adames at shortstop. But I mean, that's just me wanting to put the proven guys
right,
where they belong. Keep Terang in AAA at least until maybe summer, and then call him up with the power starts coming around at the end of the season. At the end of 2022, his power did come around, and it looked like we were projecting into something good. We just need to see what he does at the upper level. And I don't think there's a lot of difference between major league pitching and AAA pitching if you don't count the elites. You count your standard pitchers, there's not a very thick line between the two. So that's my answer. I'm sticking to it. Joey Wiemer and Bryce Terang are the two guys I'm going to get to see here in Nashville, and they're at the top of my list. I want to see what they can both do. I want to see them both reach the pinnacle with the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't want them going anywhere. They're my favorite two players in the entire franchise, and that's it. Not counting Bill Contreras.
Okay.
So
all right.
I've already pigeonholed myself there.
You sure have. Yes, you have. All right. So I believe this is a make or break year for the Brewers. I really do, especially after what happened last year with the collapse, after the big trade of Hader, with the talks and the arbitration woes of Corbin Burns, with Christian Yelich still with big question marks. I think this is the make or break year for the Milwaukee Brewers. That's what I'm sticking to. But I want to hear your predictions. 86 and 76 last season for the Milwaukee Brewers. That was good enough for second place by 7 games behind the Cardinals. Again, big collapse is what happened there. They did not make the playoffs. What say you? Look at me taking your little catchphrase from Slasher Sports Cinema. What say you, Billy? What does the Milwaukee Brewers do in 2023? Are they above their win total from last year, so over under 86.5? And where do you see them finishing in the National League Central?
I see them finishing under. under that total.
Mhm.
And not for any reason other than the fact that I don't think they're going to beat up on the Cubs like I hope they do. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. Tom Uziak hopes I'm right.
Right.
But when it comes to the Cubs, they had an off season that kind of made you raise your eyebrows.
Certainly interesting.
Did a couple of things that, like, my eyebrows jumped off my forehead, and I think they're not going to be beat upable like they were last season. They're not going to be in the same. I'm not saying it's a 3-team division. I'm not saying that at all. But now there are 3 tiers. Before it was St. Louis, Milwaukee, and then the other guys. Now it's St. Louis, Milwaukee, and then there's the Cubs, and then there's 32 miles of shit, and then there's the Pirates and the Reds. I hope Cody Patanko doesn't hear that, but hell with it. He's going to agree. It doesn't matter. Listen, it's not going to be as easy to beat up on the Cubs. They're going to take a few more games from us. But I do feel like we could still hold down second place. I don't think we're winning the division this season. I think the Cardinals have it shored up, and we're going to fight for that wild card spot. And I do think the playoffs are a real possibility, depending on what happens out west, because it seems like all the sexy teams are out west. But I mean, honestly, you could see a repeat of the Dodgers, Padres, and Giants, going to the playoffs, and then every other division has to fight for that one remaining, playoff spot. And I don't know. Can the Brewers do it? I don't know. I hope it shakes out. But I would like to say I'm optimistic, as I always am. I'm a homer. I'm a homer. You ask me who's winning the Super Bowl every year, I'm always going to say the Washington Commanders and the Buffalo Bills, because I want that. I want that for us, Christian. I want that for us. You ask me who's going to win the NBA championship, I always say the Boston Celtics.
That's right.
But I have to pull away from being a homer this time. I don't know that the Brewers can get it done with A, current management,
mm-hmm.
B, the internal mind games happening,
fair,
namely with Corbin Burns, namely with Christian Yelich being the highest paid player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I think some wealth needs to be spread around. But if we do flip Corbin Burns, and he can help answer some offensive woes, depending on who's available. I haven't even begun to do that geometry.
Right.
But if we can knock down something at third base, if we can knock down something in right field, that's going to give us like an elite player. I say go for it, go for the gusto, and win the division. But awesome. Right now, 85 wins is all I can give them.
Yeah, that's fair. Just below the under from 2022.
Yeah, just below.
All right, Slasher Sports Cinema. What's that? Let everyone know where they can find you. And you're going to be joining OBP this season, doing something your very own during the baseball season. Let us know.
Yeah, let's talk about Slasher Sports Cinema first to get it out of the way, because we got stuff to talk about when it comes to baseball. The Slasher Sports Cinema is this is all a passion project for us, isn't it, Christian? It really is. It's we have a lot of passion for the things that we talk about. Okay, we make no apologies for the content that we put out, because we love it and we want people like us to love it.
Certainly.
If it's not your cup of tea, great. We can still be the best of friends, but we're going to talk baseball. We're going to talk college sports. We're going to talk horror films. And that's what Slasher Sports Cinema is. Slasher Sports Cinema is something that I wanted to do, and I've had the full support of everybody involved with Slasher Sports. But every week, every Monday night, I'm talking to some of the very best. And when I tell you that, I very much mean I'm talking to the very best people in independent filmmaking, namely independent horror filmmaking. So one of the people that's become a very good friend. I hadn't seen him in 20 years, since high school. And he just happened to be filming a movie called Curse of the Weredeer. Not safe for work. But Curse of the Weredeer is one of the most absurd but delightful films because of the passion that he put into it. And I was just so proud that somebody from my little one-horse town got together with the guys who made, the Toxic Avenger. Like the Toxic Avenger was an 80s icon.
Mhm.
And a guy from my little one-horse town is rubbing elbows with Lloyd Kaufman, who is, kind of runs that production. And slasher sports cinema, we're talking to the very best independent filmmakers all over the place, from Patrick Ray to Ben Johnson to Reeves Elliott. Some of the coolest people out of New York are doing really good things. I like to call New York the Hollywood of indie film. And just tune in. That's all I can tell you. Tune in. You're going to find independent films that you would not have heard about otherwise. These aren't Hollywood productions. These are passionate filmmakers who are making fun movies, scary movies, but fun scary movies to end the night with. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Gotta love it.
But let's talk about the origins of slasher sports real quick.
That's right. Yeah.
Slasher sports, man, was, it started off with just us banging our heads together, trying to win a little bit in fantasy sports.
Yes, it did.
And we put a little tool together that, that helps us do our homework every day. And with that has come the ability to really get out ahead of the competition when it comes to sports betting. So I, with my good friend Christian Rao here, would like to announce that come baseball season, we're going to be having a nearly daily, and we haven't really settled on whether it's going to be a show, whether it's just going to be a live event, how produced it's going to be. It may just be me sitting here clicking on my keyboard until something happens. Hey, the Marlins just updated their batting order. Hey, the Tigers got, they scratched their starting pitcher. Whatever it is that we can do to help you lock in your daily fantasy sports rosters, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be going live an hour before first pitch on the main slates when those start at 6:05 Central. And we're gonna bang out some good DFS rosters. And whether it's just me, whether it's me with Christian, whether Christian, Steve Feck, Suki Suburbia, and Sean Doyle all jump in and raise hell, we're gonna have something live to just kind of brainstorm. You join in the chat. You can let us know what's the weather looking like in your area of the country. Are you thinking the Tigers are going to get rained out? Do you have firsthand knowledge? Jump in and tell us. But we're going to put together our best daily fantasy rosters and see if we can win some money amongst friends.
Gotta love it. I'm looking forward to that. You're going to be back and joining me at the end of the month with Sean and Steve on our flagship show, the Wednesday night right before opening day, our good old fashioned "'Tis was the night before opening day" show. I'm looking forward to having that fatal 4-way of a matchup on this show. I can't wait.
I'll bring the ladder.
That's good. Fantastic. I'll bring the table. We'll need someone to bring the chairs and we'll be all set and good to go. And then someone will bring the chips and then we'll be fine. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Row Report here at the OK Baseball Podcast presented by Slasher Sports. The Brewers have a lot of questions to do and a lot of work to do as well, in my mind. Let's see what happens in that NL Central this year because there's going to be a lot of things to talk about all through the season, I think, especially towards the trade deadline. We'll be back here with another episode soon as we continue on with these team previews. We're getting closer and closer to opening day. I mean, we are now less than 4 weeks, everyone. We are in the month of opening day. Now we're less than 4 weeks away. This is prime baseball time. Enjoy the World Baseball Classic. Enjoy more spring training. We'll be back here soon. Take care.